Hello, I'm Heath Holland, the founder and host of Serial at Midnight, and I see that you have also been invited here to the house on Haunted Hill. The legacy of this film is massive. It's famous for bringing the carnival haunted house to life and for giving us a wonderful Vincent Price performance. It's got the Emerjo gimmick, as well as for putting William Castle on the map in a big way as a lovable Schlockmeister. He was the face of these movies. This small movie was made with a cast of just 9 people, if we don't count. If we don't count the skeleton, which has its own credit, we'll see it at the end of the movie, for a reported $200,000, and has gone on to become one of the most famous horror movies ever made. Now, I talked over there's silence and then a scream on a black screen, and then horror sounds start thereafter. This was allegedly the inspiration for Scary Haunted House Records, which we'll discuss a little bit later. But imagine being in a pitch black room, black theater, right? With all this playing out really in the theater of your mind. You've got chains, creaking doors, moaning. Now imagine that it's 1959 and this sort of thing has never really been done before. Elisha Cook Jr. has he's not credited as Jr. in this movie, but he appears, he's the first thing that we see since the Allied Artist text, the logo there. And the characters introduce themselves almost like we're watching a play. So Elisha Cook Jr. is Watson Pritchard, the first talking head that we meet. He sets up that the ghosts are restless, and he sort of teases what we're in store for, telling us that 7 people, including my brother, have been murdered in the house. Since then, I bought the house. I've only spent one night there, and when they found me in the morning, I was almost dead. Did you notice that the house and Vincent Price appear on screen simultaneously? Now, there's a lot of exposition here in the beginning. Really, the first 5 minutes of the movie are setting up so much about the premise. Also, this is a beautiful shot of outside the Innes house. We're going to talk about that. The exposition that Vincent Price just imparted upon us is that he's Frederick Lauren. He's rented the house on Haunted Hill tonight so that his wife can give a party, a haunted house party. She's so very amusing. There'll be food and drinks and ghosts and perhaps even a few murders. You're all invited. So if any of you will spend the next 12 hours in the house, I'll give you each $10,000 or your next of kin in case you don't survive. But here come our other guests. So this is a very William Castle thing. The idea, we've started with a gimmick. This is a movie that has gimmicks in it, the Emerjo gimmick, but even this premise, spend the night in the haunted house, and you can win $10,000. This is a man that took out life insurance policies for his movies, for the guests, the attendees, the ticket buyers of his movies. It's just drenched in an old school carnival sort of hucksterism that it's just old school showbiz. It's a vaudeville thing. It's very deeply tied to an old kind of showbiz. The narration is continued. It was my wife's idea to have our guests arrive in funeral cars. She's so amusing. He keeps saying she's so amusing. Lance Schroeder, played by Richard Long, is the test pilot. He needs the money, but we aren't really told why yet. Ruth Bridges, Julie Mitchum, is the newspaper columnist who is using the party to write an article on ghosts. Watson Pritchard is in mortal fear of spending the night in the house. Why? Well, allegedly it's for money. Dr. David Trent is a psychiatrist who's working on hysteria, but he's greedy. And Nora Manning, who's played by Carolyn Craig, by the way, Dr. David Trent, Alan Marshall. Carolyn Craig has been picked from thousands of people who worked for Lauren because she needs the money too. So we have all these people with individual motives, and they have been invited to this place. Why would they show up? The fact that they are here implies a certain level of character, not flaw, but it's the nuance of character. They're willing to take the first step beyond the red flags. So here are our opening credits. William Castle, Raw Production. We've got our cast list here. While we are outside the house, let's talk about the house. This is the Innes house, located in Los Feliz, in the nearby vicinity of the Griffith Observatory, which is about 2.1 miles away, the Griffith Observatory and the Innes house. This is a Frank Lloyd Wright house. It was designed by Frank Lloyd Wright. It was built in 1924. The exteriors of the film used the house, which we're looking at, but the interiors are all constructed on sound stages. We're not actually inside the house. This was a private residence. The posters for the movie, by the way, show a different house that's based on sort of a Roman architecture, classic Gothic-style haunted house with a huge tower sort of thing. That's not the house that's actually in the movie. So the Innes house is designed and constructed in the Mayan Revival architectural style. The house does sit on a hill, and it's constructed of more than 24,000 textile blocks. Now, some people put that number at almost double. We don't really know, but I'm going to go with 24,000 textile blocks, all of which have this Mayan-style engraving. Each block weighs 35 pounds, and there are 4 other houses in the area that share this style, all built in the 1920s, all designed by Frank Lloyd Wright. The house occupies 6,000 square feet. It has 3 bedrooms, 3.5 baths, a garage, and an entrance hall, which is also built in this Mayan block theme. Now, the house was built for a businessman named Charles Innes, who reportedly died in 1926, shortly after by this William Castle, produced and directed by William Castle. He's given himself the coolest credit of all of those credits as the door opens and we enter into a haunted house, essentially. We've got this wonderful shot looking down at our house guests, which is a beautiful piece of cinematography. We'll talk more about the cinematographer. I want to talk a little bit more about the house, though, because I'm not really going to get another chance to do it for most of the movie. So Charles Innes died in 1926, shortly after the house was built. His wife Mabel lived there until 1936. In 1944, the actor John Nesbitt bought the house, and he hired Frank Lloyd Wright to redesign some of the elements, to add some new things, make some renovations. By the late 1950s, the time of this movie, the house was not in great condition. It had changed hands 7 times since its construction, and it had, especially after this movie, it had really gained a reputation as an actual haunted house. I mean, you know, we have people that have died in the house. Now, interestingly, a number of our cast died before their time. I'm not suggesting that this movie is cursed in any way, shape, or form. I think this is a good piece of fun, but it's just interesting that there is a certain amount of death that sort of associated with the people that were in the vicinity of the house. But after this movie, the house really became problematic because there would be young people that would climb the walls. They'd spray graffiti on the walls. They would come over. They would scream because of the movie, of course. And the owner at the time, allegedly, would chase the youth off with a shotgun. So it was sort of undesirable for a long time. And then during the 1990s, the house was open to the public for tours 6 times a day and then renovated. It's now, it had cost $300,000 to build in 1924. It sold in 2019 for $18 million, which is a hefty sum of money. So we're now getting more to know. We're getting to know the cast a little bit more, and this is our introduction to Carol Ohmart as Annabelle Lauren, Frederick's wife, and there's a ton of exposition in this scene. We learn that the party was her idea, but that she wanted it to be a party for all of their friends, and then that they don't really have any friends left thanks to Frederick's jealousy. Instead, Frederick has invited these 5 strangers with a reason for each of his selections. So we've learned that she wanted to have a good time. He's eccentric. He turned it into something she never wanted it to be. So much exposition. This is a movie that really, at multiple times, it's telling us certain things. The beginning shot with the heads floating there, right? It's just straight up narration, setting a stage. That's not always great. You want to have the movie show you, not necessarily tell you, but it is, in this scene, it is very much showing us, because there's this talk about she had tried to poison him. He makes her drink the wine first. There's so much tension between these two. And this is a wonderful role for Carol Ohmart, who had the potential for much more. She was born in Salt Lake City. Armelia Carol Ohmart was born in Salt Lake City, Utah on June 3rd of 1927 into a devout Mormon family, which is something that she struggled with. this religious upbringing for her entire life. Her father was a dentist and an actor, and it seems that Carol had showbiz in her blood. She was singing from a very young age on the radio, and after she graduated from high school, she started competing in beauty pageants, and she won the Miss Utah pageant of 1946. She was the 4th runner-up that year in the Miss America pageant. So by 1947, she's doing professional model work, and she's a real-life reference for the Copper Calhoun and the Steve Canyon comic strip. By the end of the 1940s, she's appearing on television in regular commercial work, TV commercials. And at the dawn of the 1950s, she's moved into dramatic roles on TV shows like Lights Out, The Clock, Dark Destiny, The Plainclothesman, December Bride. Actually, these are film roles. By 1955, she's being marketed as the female Brando. And the newspapers and Paramount actually signed her with the intentions of turning her into the next Marilyn Monroe. It didn't really work out. Her jump to features came in 1956 when she landed the top billing in the Michael Curtiz directed film, The Scarlet Hour. It's a noir in which she plays a femme fatale, which is good casting because she's kind of a femme fatale here too. Spoilers for House on Haunted Hill. I'm assuming you've seen this movie before. Most of us know this movie like the back of our hand, and I'm assuming you probably do too. If you haven't seen this movie before, go watch the movie, come back for the commentary. Later that same year, after The Scarlet Hour, she takes the second billing in The Wild Party, which is another film noir, though this time she's sort of a captive, not a femme fatale. In 1958, she appears in the Mamie Van Doren Western vehicle Born Reckless, which leads us up to her appearance here in 1959 with, I think, a vital role, one of the most important roles in the entire picture. Following this movie, her status seemed to rise, or at least opportunities for regular TV work. This is the thing that was happening in pop culture at the time. Film has given way to television in the 1950s, and you see a lot of film actors going to television. Film has to transform itself into something else to maintain public interest, because you can get it at home for free. We have these things at home, right? So she's in a guest of the week appearance on many shows, Special Agent 7, Bronco, The Life and Legend of Wyatt Earp, Man Without a Gun, How to Marry a Millionaire, Bachelor Father, Hawaiian Eye, M Squad. You're going to hear some of these TV show names a lot over the course of this commentary, because our actors here, many of them, share a lot of common they show a lot of common credits. They all were on a lot of the same shows. These shows put her in front of, and all of the cast put them in front of huge audiences of people. I mean, we're talking an audience of millions and millions of people. So she continues after this movie. There's a sort of a short period where she's working prolifically. She's on Tombstone Territory, Johnny Midnight, Tales of Wells Fargo, Route 66, Michael Shane, 77 Sunset Strip, Coronado 9, The Third Man TV show. That's a big one. I have a running joke that you can gauge an actor's success by whether or not they appeared on, if it depends on the era. If we're talking about a 1950s or 1960s actor, did they appear on Perry Mason? If they're a 70s actor, did they appear on Columbo? So we're dealing with the 1950s here, and Carol Ohmart did appear in a 1961 episode of Perry Mason. Though she continued to act, and she appeared in more feature films over the years, including the lead in 1960's Wild Youth and Jack Hill's 1967 cult horror classic Spider Baby, or The Maddest Story Ever Told. Her television work really becomes more sporadic in the later 60s and 70s. You see her on Get Smart, Branded, and Mannix, and Barnaby Jones. But her very final acting role is in a little-seen 1974 horror movie called The Spectre of Edgar Allan Poe. Though her film and television career actually spanned nearly 25 years, the bulk of her on-screen work was between 1959 and 1962. During that brief period, she's in over 30 projects, and I think those projects are really what cements her legacy as a character actor in some of the most recognizable projects on the screen, both at home and at the movies. It's just a shame that she wasn't offered better roles in higher pedigree films. And she'd started her career as, quote, the female Brando, but the quality of the screenplays never really lived up to that promise. let's talk about the music a little bit. By the way, there's a line that it was a couple of minutes back. Don't let the ghouls keep you up all night. Darling, the only ghoul in this house is you. This is a fun scene with the blood, the dripping blood. We could talk about, let's talk about Julie Mitchum, because this is Robert Mitchum's older sister. She plays Ruth Bridges. She's the older sister of actor and occasional calypso singer Robert Mitchum, but she's a musician too. During the 1940s, she was a nightclub pianist and a singer. The Desert Sun newspaper out of Palm Springs reviewed a 1947 performance by Julie Mitchum, writing, "Witty, droll, and amusing, yet with a sophistication rarely found combined at the same time with those qualities. A clever girl entertainer. Julie Mitchum is charming. The customers nightly at Mr. D's." She's a song stylist playing and singing at the piano, but with acting ability, for she is that, an actress, and one who entertained thousands of boys in the service overseas during the war, and even before. She is clever with her interpretation of songs and manages easily to gain the rapt attention of everyone in the place. Storytelling in songs, she calls it, with humor and rare knowledge of the extremes of music. She offers such versatile entertainment, each at the listener's whim, of classical, popular, and jazz, novelty, and each with a rare, almost magical interpretation rarely found. For a while, she even had her, this is me now, I'm not reading from a paper, but for a while, she even had her own radio show on KLAC, the Julie Mitchum Show, which aired Sunday nights at 10:30 p.m., and of her 8 film credits, there's only 8 film credits, spanning 1947 to 1959. 3 of them are uncredited, including an appearance as a slave in the Ten Commandments, which of course Vincent Price was also in. House on Haunted Hill is Julie Mitchum's final film, though she lived until 2003. So I want to talk a little bit about the music. There was a syndicated feature that ran in newspapers late 1958 into early 1959. And they talked to, as we're getting this glimpse of the acid pit. You know, you have an acid pit in the basement. Who doesn't? You know, we're making wine and all this stuff, but you know, we have an acid pit. I mean, it's explained. There's so many things in this movie that if you take seriously, you will probably disappoint yourself, because this is a movie that really just asks you to go with it. It's just, let's go have a good time, right? So this syndicated piece in the newspaper is interviewing composer and conductor Vaughn Dexter, quote, youthful music director for NBC, who also does the music for Ralph Edwards' This Is Your Life. The score has been called by Dexter music to haunt you by. And a picture as unusual and different as House on Haunted Hill, an entirely different theme pattern had to be evolved. Because of its eerie and supernatural nature, the music should have a haunting, chilling quality, one that doesn't intrude on the action, but one that accelerates and promotes the feeling of the unreal, which both the director and the players are attempting to promulgate. Now, this is a quote from Vaughn Dexter. This is PR, right? It's promotion disguised as an interview, because he probably didn't even say this. Perhaps it's a little bit PR-y. To achieve the effect I desired in the music, I was careful to use woodwinds like oboes, bass clarinets, and subtone clarinets. And he also uses a theremin, which I love. I mean, the theremin is really the character that runs all throughout the 1950s horror scene. It's also worth pointing out that Vaughn Dexter served as the composer on the William Castle films The Tingler, 13 Ghosts, and Mr. Sardonicus. And so we're getting more. There's character stuff happening right here on screen. This is another movie that just lets us live with the characters, and it's through those characters that we are... everyone seems to... they have motivations. They have reasons for being there. This is Richard Long and Carolyn Craig. Richard Long plays Lance Schroeder. He was born in 1927 in Chicago. He's probably better remembered for his TV work than his movie roles, but he had a near-decade-long run in the movies before he ever appeared on TV. You'll see him in notable film noir movies like The Stranger, the Orson Welles movie, The Dark Mirror, Crisscross, which is a fantastic noir. But he's also in lighter fare like The Egg and I, which opened the door to appearances in several Ma and Pa Kettle films. He was a regular player in Westerns, too. Westerns were huge, and then the best Westerns ever made, generally, are in the 1950s. He's in Kansas Raiders with Audie Murphy. He's in the film Saskatchewan, which was Alan Ladd, directed by Raoul Walsh. Horror fans will take special note of his role in the 1955 movie Cult of the Cobra at Universal. And then after a string of TV guest spots in the latter half of the 1950s. By the way, this is... we'll come back to this too, but this is Leona Anderson as Mrs. Slides. She literally slides. I think they named her Mrs. Slides because she literally slides across the floor. Now, she's the character... We know from watching the movie, she's the blind caretaker. One of the caretakers of the house. Is she on skates? Is she on a platform? Now, I'm telling you, you have to take these things in the spirit in which they're intended. This movie exists as the living embodiment of a funhouse haunted house. That's all this is ever supposed to be. It's also got that heavy Agatha Christie whodunit element to it. But if you think of the practicality of why is this woman floating around in the dark? Well, she's blind, so she doesn't need the lights. But, you have to dismiss these things or you tear it apart. And we don't want to tear it apart. So back to Richard Long. He's in a lot of TV stuff in the 1950s. Schlitz Playhouse, Goodyear Theater, Wagon Train, Have Gun Will Travel. And then he lands the role of Lance Schroeder here in House on Haunted Hill. Later in 1959, he takes the co-starring role in Tokyo After Dark over at Paramount. And he'd appear in a few more feature films over the years, but that sort of wraps up his movie career, and television really takes off. He's in Sugarfoot, Maverick, Bourbon Street Beat. Here are these names again. I'd say that this could be a fun drinking game, but you would injure yourself, so do not do this. But when you hear Bourbon Street Beat, Hawaiian Eye, Tales of Wells Fargo, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, The Alfred Hitchcock Hour, and the fact that Richard Long is in a whopping 31 episodes of 77 Sunset Strip. By the way, 2 episodes of The Twilight Zone, too. These are some of the biggest TV shows, not just of their time, even now, all these years later. The Twilight Zone, Alfred Hitchcock, these are huge roles. He's best remembered probably as his character Jared Barkley on The Big Valley, which he appeared on 112 episodes of that show. In 1970, he starred as the professor on all 54 episodes of Nanny and the Professor, opposite Juliet Mills. He no doubt would have continued working for many more years had he not suffered a heart attack in 1974 as a result of childhood pneumonia that led to lifelong heart problems. He was only 47 years old when he died, and he's the first member of our cast that we've mentioned that had what I would consider to be a premature death. Carolyn Craig, in the shot right now, was born in Valley Stream, New York in 1934. Though her resume includes about 50 film and TV projects, she's probably best known for this movie. Unlike some of our other cast members who began in features and then transitioned to television later, she worked almost exclusively in TV with only a few stopovers in feature films across her really 12-year acting career. But her film debut was a huge one. She's in the movie Giant, the 1956 George Stevens film with Rock Hudson, Elizabeth Taylor, and James Dean in what would be his final screen appearance. She has an uncredited appearance in A Face in the Crowd, and she takes third billing in Furious Showdown, a 1957 Western starring John Derrick. Later in 1957, she takes the second billing in the true crime film. It's a film noir, really, Portland Expose. One of those ripped from the headline movies that we got a lot of, that William Castle worked in as well. Look at this clock showing us the time. They've already established, midnight is sort of the deadline. That's when this all goes down, and keeping us up to date on where we are in the scheme of things. Before her casting in House on Haunted Hill, Carolyn Craig had already been in General Electric Theater, The George Burns and Gracie Allen Show, Medic, Buffalo Bill Jr., Annie Oakley, State Trooper, The Rifleman, The O. Henry Playhouse, and yes, Perry Mason. House on Haunted Hill did not really create any additional work for Craig, but she continued to work steadily in TV during the early 1960s, appearing in Overland Trail, all right, here we go, Hawaiian Eye, The Life and Legend of Wyatt Earp, The Deputy, The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis. Shotgun Slade, 77, Sunset Strip, My Three Sons, and Laramie. And she's even in 2 episodes of the long-running soap opera General Hospital in 1963. But that is where her acting career ends, because sadly, Carolyn Craig died in 1970 of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. This is now the second person we've talked about from our cast that met a premature end. Now, this cinematography is absolutely wonderful. The shadow play. We also have a sense of location. You know, we're shooting on a soundstage here, but we've gone from one room, the wall of one room, to the wall in another room. The idea of, like, we're distracted, right? Tap on the wall. We're paying attention to the wall, listening with our ears, and we are not prepared for this jump scare. Again, why is Mrs. Slides doing this? Why is she, and is she's back on roller skates? I don't think we can question it too much. It's not for us to question. And how does he miss her? Well, he just walks right past her. By the way, that's Leona Anderson. She's the sister of Gilbert M. Anderson, who you might know better by the name of Bronco Billy Anderson, widely regarded as one of the very first Western movie stars. Is a co-founder of the S&E Studios. So we're talking about silent movie royalty here. Leona had appeared in silent films in the teens, including one directed by Charlie Chaplin. It was the short In the Park. She's better known as a comedic singer. She would pretend to sing opera badly. That was her, I'm going to use the word shtick. That was her shtick, is that she would sing poorly, sort of making fun of how serious opera singers took themselves. How seriously opera singers took themselves. She released several singles through Columbia with titles like Rats in My Room and Limburger Lover. And she even released a full album in 1957 called Music to Suffer By. So keep that in mind. 2 years before this movie, Leona Anderson had an album. She was a hit with comedy people too. Ernie Kovacs was a fan. She had a reputation. I don't know if the general audience, they probably would have seen her on television, late night TV shows, or it wouldn't have been necessarily late night, but on television shows. She's only in 2 films during the sound era. I mentioned her silent film work, but she's in Johnny Gunman in 1957, and House on Haunted Hill in 1959. This is her final film role. So Annabelle is now meeting more of the house guests, the woman that's been sort of, not hiding, but secreted away. Look at the shot, too, the disparity in their height. It's beautifully staged. Annabelle is nearly a whole head taller than Nora, and Nora's uncomfortable. Annabelle is not. So there's a nice power dynamic at play here, as they sort of size one another up. Again, it's a character moment in a movie that is, I think the reputation is that this is I think I've mentioned it myself, it's a funhouse movie. It's bringing the haunted house to life. And at a time, really, when these movies were not very common. There had been a real cooling of ghost movies. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. But this line here, too. You're in danger. We all are. From who? I hope for your sake, you never find out. I guess she's in danger from Annabelle, knowing what we know. Is Vincent Price's character... Well, I was going to ask if Vincent Price's character is actually dangerous. I mean, he is, but is he dangerous to these house guests? I think, there's a remake of this movie. So, sort of a remake in spirit, because I'm talking about the 1999 version of House on Haunted Hill, which cast... they reset, instead of a house, it's an insane asylum. But the idea is that the host is toying with them for his own amusement, because he's an eccentric. In that movie, he's an eccentric amusement park mogul. I think Vincent Price is doing this because he's rich and he's bored. Really. So there's more exposition here. There's more... are they flirting? I feel like this is sort of setting planting the seeds that Annabelle is interested. She's available. She's looking for other suitors, right? She's not necessarily unwilling to talk to the other men that are there. We also learn around this time. I mean, I feel like she's flirting with him. If I need my help, if I need help, can I count on you? Right? I mean, she's obviously playing these characters, but she's using her feminine wiles to do so. There is exposition around this scene. We learn that Annabelle is the fourth wife, and that the first disappeared and the other two died. So this is telling us, it's not showing us, it's telling us, but I think it's okay here. We're also dealing with a low-budget movie, $200,000. So, and it's a 75-minute film too. So I'm forgiving of things like this, and I actually think that in movies of this era, it's okay to have your characters explain who they are via exposition. But anytime you can show something instead of telling, that's ideal. She says that Frederick is planning something sinister, but she's not sure what. Presumably this is true. Presumably this is her being honest. Because though we know she has her own plan for what's going to go down in the last act of this movie, when the movie really becomes something else, she doesn't really know what cards Vincent Price is, or Frederick, her husband, is, what cards he's holding. Look at this shot with the shadow. The shadow on the wall. Wonderful cinematography. Let's talk about the cinematographer. Carl E. Guthrie was a wonderfully accomplished cinematographer. He had a real talent for lensing dramatic shots that elevated lower budget films into something really, I think, more than the sum of their parts. Notable credits in his resume include Christmas in Connecticut with Barbara Stanwyck, Between Two Worlds with John Garfield, Storm Warning with Ginger Rogers and Ronald Reagan, or Ronnie Reagan, Iron Man with Jeff Chandler. It's a remake of a sort of a boxing noir thing. All I Desire, again with Barbara Stanwyck, Playgirl with Shelley Winters, Johnny Dark with Tony Curtis and Piper Laurie. They made a lot of films together. Long John Silver's Return to Treasure Island, which is that's a whole other thing because that's sort of tropical. That's a pirate movie. That's not a noir. That's not a black and white, locked off studio set. By the way, Vincent Price is pulling her hair here, so he's showing some real nastiness here. This is the first time we've really seen Frederick drop the cool guy act and actually get sort of violent and aggressive. Carly Guthrie also shot Kiss of Fire with Jack Palance and Barbara Rush, Fort Massacre with Joel McCrea, which is a wonderful Western, Frankenstein 1970, and of course multiple William Castle films that include Hollywood Story from 1951, which is one of William Castle's more straight studio pictures, and of course House on Haunted Hill. He also shot one of my favorite Westerns of all time, the 1957 film Quantas, which I love. And near the end of his career, he shot 15 episodes of The Third Man television series starring Michael Rennie. We've already talked about The Third Man TV series. 8 episodes of Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea starring Richard Basehart. And 9 episodes of Honey West starring Anne Francis. So he's moved to television, right? But so many of these guys, not just guys, so many of these men and women, actors, the writers, the directors, they move to television. This Head in a Box is pretty gruesome. I'd scream too, especially, this is 1959, guys. This is not, 2012 or whatever. We're looking at pretty grisly stuff for 1959. And go back to that silence opening, or the dark screen opening with the chains and the screams and the moaning. It's fairly revolutionary for its time. Carly Guthrie, as I wrap up his career, I think it's worth mentioning that the last thing he ever worked on while he was alive was the Green Hornet television series starring Van Williams and Bruce Lee. He shot 17 of that show's 27 episodes. With a career so varied and with so many wonderful, I want to use the word heartwarming because I'm thinking about Christmas movies and Westerns and things like that, and even thrillers. It's kind of striking to me that Carl E. Guthrie is still maybe best known for his work lensing House on Haunted Hill. I mean, in his entire resume, this is the thing that pops up first when you look him up. Which is, that's an interesting, that's the power of this movie. Here we go. Here are the groundskeepers. So we've got Mrs. Slides. Is she gonna float towards camera? Maybe that's how she. Do we see her walk? No, hold on a second. I gotta see if we see her walk. Maybe that's how she gets around everywhere. She's on a skateboard. She's on a 1959 skateboard. But that's also Howard Hoffman, who plays Jonas, the other caretaker. And he's got an interesting career because he didn't start acting until very late in life. Annabelle has entered the scene. Howard Hoffman started acting really. He was middle-aged. I mean, he's in uncredited, like very small uncredited roles. A variety of film and TV projects that start really around 1954. Though he had actually appeared in a TV movie back in 1945. That was sort of a one-off. And then he worked multiple times with William Castle, first on the 1958 movie Macabre. This is the film, this film, and then Straight Jacket, 1954. The Clock Again. And you think, there's the genius of the screenplay too, because you're like, well, you've got 6 minutes. It's all going to go down in 6 minutes. But no. I also like the rules. This Price sort of dispenses these with a smile. If any of you die, which imparts the threat that they are not safe. They've all come here out of desperation or greed or for various reasons. But they know that it's not safe. And he's sort of telling them the rules. By the way, so many of the rules here, this movie was early in a certain style of film. Now, we'd had them in the 30s. We'd had them in the 40s. They really go away later in the 40s and into the 1950s. The rules of this are similar to the rules of the remake of The Haunting. That was that 1999, the Liam Neeson movie with Catherine Zeta-Jones and Owen Wilson and Lily Taylor in the night, in the dark. Very similar rules. And so I like that. I'm going to wrap up Howard Hoffman because this is important. Though he had very few screen credits to his name, he still managed to get himself cast in an episode of Perry Mason. That's right. The caretaker, Jonas, in this movie is in an episode of Perry Mason. He's only in a handful of things, but he's in Perry Mason. So there's the rules, right? We've got, this is their last chance to get out. The caretakers lock everything up. Then at that point, we're all locked in. Even those like Nora, who don't want to be, she was going to go. She was going to leave. And there's lots of, let's talk about the set dressing here. Oh, by the way, I love these little, I love that the guns, and we don't even see that they're guns until that shot right there. It's the second to last box. So we're like, oh, there are guns. There are pistols in these little coffins. This is so dramatic. It's so melodramatic. And if you think about it, look, live ammo. He shot that right by Annabelle's ear too. She's probably got some tinnitus going on in the world of the movie because he shot so close to her ear. Again, Richard Price's character Frederick here is just sort of not a prankster, but he loves the manipulation of people. He's having fun toying with people. He's like one of those YouTubers that has millions and millions of subscribers and can just make people do crazy things for the money. So I would draw that connection. I'm bringing that up for a reason, because sometimes people dismiss this movie as being so campy. I mean, it is campy, but the movie knows what it is. And we absolutely have people like Vincent Price's character in our lives right now. This is not a thing that's gone away. Yes, worth mentioning, this is a turning point in the careers of both Vincent Price and William Castle around this time. So William Castle had been making largely respectable films at Columbia for Harry Cohn. Modestly budgeted Western crime and even swashbuckler and adventure films, but they were solid B movies with generally good technical merits. They looked good. They had decent screenplays. But with 1958's Macabre and 1959's House on Haunted Hill, William Castle really begins a run of very gimmicky horror movies that would cement his legacy as a shameless schlockmeister of the first order, not to mention an incredible businessman. 1958's Macabre was an independently, I think it's one of his first independent movies. He sold the movie to audiences with a gimmick. By the way, he mortgaged his house to raise the money for this. And then he sold it to the audience with a gimmick, which is one of his earliest and most creative. He gave ticket buyers a $1,000 life insurance policy if they happened to die of fright during the film. Not only that, but he had hearses in the parking lot of the theater, and he hired nurses to occupy the lobbies. And this creates a sense of danger and fear around the film. And it's great. So before you've even gone into the movie is what it is, but before you've even gone into it, you've already got this apprehension. And, you know, this is so serious that there's a life insurance policy for $1,000. And I think that when Vincent Price's character gives that speech about, you know, the money, and if you all die, you know, the money will be collected, and give this whole idea of it's you know, a reward for your death is essentially what it is. By the way, so that had the life insurance policy was a gimmick to sell the movie, right? This movie has the emergo technique, which he had patented, copyrighted this technique, which was, I think most of us know. But there was a skeleton that was stored in a little box that was secreted near the screen. And at a certain part of the movie, near the end, you know the part, a light would shine on the skeleton and he would fly out over a pulley system over the audience. And it's interesting. I'll read you some criticism later, closer to the end of the movie. It worked for some people, and for some people it did not work at all. I mean, the belief, the suspension of disbelief, the scare factor. Anyway, William Castle's run continues through the mid to late 1960s. He started later in 1959 with The Tingler, again with Vincent Price. They worked together on these two movies. And for that movie, Castle used Percepto, in which he installed these vibrating motors under certain theater seats. Next was 13 Ghosts in 1960, which used the Illusion O gimmick that relied on red and blue glasses to reveal ghosts on the screen. Homicidal, 1961, employed a, quote, fright break that lasted for 45 seconds and offered a full refund to anyone who walked out of the movie during the break. That was actually, we're back outside the house, so the exterior shot of the house there. People would try to game the system when the movie first opened by, I believe this is the movie where people would stay through until the next showing, and then they would get to that fright break, and then they would go out to get their money back because they'd already seen the movie and stayed through the other 3/4 of the movie again. And so he had devised, because this is who William Castle was, a different colored ticket system for the different shows. So if you had a red ticket, say, and you tried to get your money back for the green ticket showing, you couldn't do it. Just clever, innovative. It's just such a smart way to do business by head in a closet. You know, we've all been there. You go to a hotel, you open the closet, you know. No, but again, this is pretty grisly stuff. And watch this shot, because he's going at some point in the next few seconds. So far, we've just seen the head from behind. Really. I think this is the shot. Yeah. Right in the camera. Right in your face. So again, pretty innovative stuff. Castle's also, I don't think there were necessarily the gimmicks, such successful gimmicks associated with these, but Mr. Sardonicus in 1961, 13 Frightened Girls in 1963. He directed a remake of The Old Dark House in 1963. I mean, this movie is such an homage to The Old Dark House. And he'd been inspired, by the way, by the I believe it's 1927 Dracula stage play with Bela Lugosi. Before Bela Lugosi was Dracula on stage, he was in the stage version. That's what Castle saw, and he thought, I want to do that. I want to scare people, and my goodness, he did. We have a hanging woman. We don't know who it is yet. I should also mention that William Castle, in the 1960s, after Psycho, William Castle does make some more serious horror. I'd probably even call them thrillers, not horror movies, but Straight Jacket, The Night Walker, I Saw What You Did, Let's Kill Uncle. Movies like that have a different tone than this one does. We still don't know who it is, but Vincent Price is going to have something to say about this, because Watch the face of our doctor here, too. Does he betray anything? Of course, he's just put a dead body on the bed. And now we know it's Annabelle. That's the shot that reveals that it's Annabelle. Vincent Price is good here, too, because he's surprised. He's genuinely surprised. He had also been known as a serious actor, though certainly a melodramatic one. His turns in classics like Laura, The Ten Commandments, it's a pretty big performance in The Ten Commandments, but The House on Seven Gables, Dragonwyck, The Web, 1948's The Three Musketeers are fairly serious movies. I like this shot. We are looking perspective. He's walking towards camera. He's walking toward us, and we are seeing the length of the hallway. This is giving us a sense of place. It's also giving us, he's walking into the unknown, essentially. And I'm going to talk about that in relationship to a Disney attraction coming up here shortly. But I'm calling it out because I want you to notice it. Vincent Price, of course, had sort of two different careers. He'd had the serious, he's a stage actor, which shows in everything he does. But he'd also starred in these serious movies and also horror movies like Tower of London, The Invisible Man Returns, House of Wax is a huge one, The Mad Magician. But he's still not a camp actor. He's still not a horror actor when we find him in this movie. Really in the span of about 2 years, he starred in nearly half a dozen horror films that turned him into a scary movie icon. In 1958, which is 1 year before House on Haunted Hill, he'd taken a lead role in The Fly. And in 1959, of course, he stars in this movie. Also, Return of the Fly, The Tingler, again with William Castle at the helm, and The Bat, the remake of The Bat. By 1960, Roger Corman had launched the Poe cycle with House of Usher, which was followed by Pit and the Pendulum, Master of the World, Confessions of an Opium Eater, Tales of Terror. I'm just naming horror movies now. The 1962 version of The Tower of London, The Raven, Diary of a Madman, The Haunted Palace, Twice Told Tales, The Comedy of Terrors, Last Man on Earth, The Mask of Red Death, The Tomb of Ligeia. Price is in all of these. So in the span of like 6 years, he goes from starring in a huge variety of films, many calling for straight, serious, sort of earnest performances that allowed him to strut the stage and deliver these theatrical yet still grounded performances, to appearing almost entirely as over-the-top villains who chew the scenery. But it is worth mentioning that while Price is clearly playing his role here with relish in House on Haunted Hill, he's also not nearly as over-the-top as he would be in later films. I mean, this is a restrained Price. I don't think he ever raises his voice in this film. He's pretty cool and collected from every scene that he's in, except for that hair pulling scene. But even then, he was still pretty cool. He plays the whole movie as if he knows a secret. And I suppose he does. This is around the time that Price's Baroque period begins. By Baroque, I'm referring, of course, to the style of music, architecture, our performance that's definitely it's ornate, it's big, it's heavily flourished, it's extravagant, it's showy. We could just call it campy, but Baroque carries the connotation of sort of an artistic choice, which I think Price was very much making here. In a syndicated promotional piece, again, it was an interview. It was promotion presented as an interview around this movie. But he said that House on Haunted Hill, quote, marks the return to the screen of the classic ghost story, an area of entertainment that has been neglected for far too long. Youngsters today have never seen a real ghost story on the screen, and that's a pity. There's a big difference between a ghost story and what passes today for a horror picture. Nothing comes out of the lagoon, and there are no four-headed zombies or human-devouring plants in a ghost story. In the latter category, the producers, writers, directors, and actors strive for sheer spookiness, the unreal, the unearthliness. It's a delightful form of entertainment, and one that hasn't been exploited or explored for far too long a time. So when I read that, I thought, is that accurate? Had there been a dearth of ghost stories? By the way, just straight up choking Elisha Cook Jr. So, not a man in control of himself. But I was thinking about this. There's the Dean Martin movie, the Martin and Lewis movie Scared Stiff. Maybe The Screaming Skull. A few others, but I do think that Castle was onto something here. The classic ghost story, as it had existed, with some of the movies like Cat and the Canary and some of the Bat, the silent movie, the old dark house. Well, not necessarily ghost stories. There was a thing that had been absent. It had taken a back seat in the 1950s to really monster movies, usually monsters that science had created. So I'm going to try to get caught back up with where we are on screen now. This is really a dividing point in the movie, in my opinion. If you look at this movie as acts, Act 1 is setting the stage, getting everybody to the house and laying out the stakes. Act 2 is now the screaming starts. the mayhem begins. And now I think this is Act 3, in which the story really becomes a mystery. There's a meeting without Nora to discuss what's going on. It's straight out of an Agatha Christie novel. There's a heavy whodunit element here. None of these people trust anyone. They all suspect that one of them is a murderer. And in this scene, they're trying to figure out who has the motive. Look at this shot with the big horn in the foreground. Rob White is our screenwriter here. And he also wrote 24 novels, which I think shows in his screenplay. He was a prolific magazine contributor, writing for the Saturday Evening Post, Reader's Digest, Esquire, and others. His screenplay for the 1958 movie Macabre, William Castle's movie, was his first produced movie script. And then after House on Haunted Hill, he also wrote the screenplays for the William Castle movies The Tingler, 13 Ghosts, and Homicidal. After Homicidal, he worked in television screenplays where he wrote a whopping 8 episodes of, Perry Mason. So for those keeping track at home, there are actually multiple, I think 5 total cast members of this movie are actually on Perry Mason. And if you bump up the screenwriter of this movie, we have 6 people associated with this movie who would go on to Perry Mason. So the common denominator between these things, I bring all this up because these projects were huge. And some of these shows were just people eaters because they needed new people week after week. And sometimes they would use people over again. So I also think that partnership between Rob White and William Castle on all of those projects shows how the motion picture business worked then and really still works today. I mean, when a team or a studio has a hit, they try to replicate the success over and over again, introducing only enough innovation to keep things fresh enough to sell once again. I mean, Castle's making these gimmicky movies over and over and over again, and he's selling them with some of the same techniques over and over and over again. It's impressive that they continue to be successful. This movie was very successful. But are things different now when we have 10 sequels to something that was a hit 20, 30 years ago? When they'll make a sequel to a movie from 30 years in the past, I think the business is the business is not exactly the same, but the showmanship and the techniques behind the business haven't changed all that much, I don't think. Should we talk a little bit about Elisha Cook Jr. while he's still with us here? He's on frame right now, or in the frame right now. He plays Watson Pritchard, of course. He was born in San Francisco in 1903, and he had a prolific acting career that spanned from 1930 until 1988. That's nearly 60 years and over 200 screen credits. So his work during the 1930s usually relied on him playing younger than he actually was, usually like a college student, like a young collegiate guy, due to his smaller stature and his youthful voice. The kind of roles that he was offered changed with his casting in The Maltese Falcon in 1941, opening the door to many years of squirrely, nervous characters. I think that's exactly what he is here. He's walking towards us in shadows. He's almost typecast as that guy. And you'll see him in a lot of film noir. I Wake Up Screaming, Phantom Lady, Dark Mountain, Dark Waters, The Falcon's Alibi, The Big Sleep, Born to Kill, The Long Night, which also features Vincent Price, the Alan Ladd version of The Great Gatsby, which isn't quite noir, but it's on the line there. I, Jury, and Accused of Murder. Notably, he is in Stanley Kubrick's The Killing in a similar role where he's a squirrely, nervous guy. He's also in a large number of westerns, including One-Eyed Jacks, directed by Marlon Brando. And he's in more TV shows than I can even begin to name. But I'll name a few highlights. So you'll find him in Alfred Hitchcock Presents, The O. Henry Playhouse, The Life and Legend of Wyatt Earp. Again, you've heard these names multiple times now. Schlitz Playhouse, 77 Sunset Strip, Surfside 6, that's the theme song, Wagon Train, Rawhide, and not one, but 2 episodes of Perry Mason. Of all the actors in House on Haunted Hill, I think Cook by far had the longest and most varied career. Multiple generations know him for his character actor work in film or TV projects that they grew up with, ranging from The Adventures of Superman to, that's in the 1950s, through the original Star Trek in the 1960s, all the way to Alf and Magnum P.I. in the 1980s. It's quite a career. Someone's testing the door here. You're never safe in a room in an old dark house. Let's talk about the reviews. How was this movie received when it was first released? A syndicated promotional piece is another one of these promotions disguised as an interview. And again, we still see that. We see that all over social media. It seems like it's an interview, but it's just PR. They called it a ghost story of the highest excellence and went on to say, long neglected by Hollywood, the ghost story has been a staple form of entertainment for many years. House on Haunted Hill is reminiscent of such classics of yesteryear as The Bat. Now, they're not talking about the Vincent Price version because that hadn't been made yet. That wouldn't be made until later in 1959. The Cat and the Canary, 7 Keys to Baldpate, and The Monster. We're back to this dripping blood. The tension, our culprits are really tightening the tension here. The people that are manipulating the situation are really cranking it up. In an early review, Walt Hackett wrote, quote, Vincent Price does a masterful job of playing the rich fellow with a somewhat sadistic sense of humor. He does this type of thing especially well, and he does. There's a gimmick that is introduced in this one that really brings the chills right out to you. I won't give the secret away, but suffice to say, in the cast, the skeleton plays itself. If you like this sort of thing, you will thoroughly enjoy House on Haunted Hill. But I'll have to admit, blasé as I sometimes think I am sure I got a bit white around the gills in several spots. I would not want to do that too often. Variety wrote, House on Haunted Hill is expertly put together. There's some good humor in the dialogue, which not only pays off well against the ghostly elements, but provides a release for laughter, so it does not explode in the suspense sequences. The characters are interesting and not outlandish, so there is some basis of reality. Director William Castle keeps things moving at a healthy clip. I think that's a wonderful review because it notes that the movie is intentionally inviting us into some laughs. Tension and release. Tension and release. You build tension and then you release it. And a good thriller filmmaker or horror filmmaker, look at the shadow. This is a noir. These are noir shadows right here. They're not blinds, but these bars, of course, symbolic of being in a prison. You're trapped. It's also probably hiding the limitations of the set, but it is just so effective. This movie is masterfully done. Anyone that could watch this and think that so much of this is not intentionally crafted for all of the thrills, all the chills, all the comedy, all the release, the jump scares. I mean, this is such a well put together film. Not everybody got it. The New York Times film critic Howard Thompson which is probably saying enough right there just to mention his name. But Howard Thompson was unkind. He called the Allied artist double bill that also included Legion of Doomed and House on Haunted Hill, quotes, a 2.5 hour load of junk, unquote. He went on to say that the film was a stale concoction, and notes that the audience snickered when the skeleton flew over their heads via emergo, saying, quote, here was one performer who obviously couldn't wait to meet the public and instantly regretted it. So we've had one guy say that he was white around the gills when the skeleton flew out over the audience. By the way, how is Annabelle... How? Is this a projection? Like that episode of the Brady Bunch where Greg projects into the backyard? Is she on a platform? Like with Mrs. Slides, also the rope. How do we explain the rope? You don't explain. They figured it out. They know how to achieve what they were trying to do. They're trying to scare her. And I think now we're seeing, I'm going to talk spoilers for the movie. The goal is to drive her crazy so that she starts popping off her gun and takes care of Annabelle's problem for her. Annabelle and the doctor's problem for them. Push her to her limits so that they have a perfect alibi, really. A patsy. It's a smart plan. And again, this is where it's not just a haunted house movie at this point. Look at this. How did she get back in the house so quick? I like the projector idea. And that's, in real life, the Haunted Mansion uses these things. I bring up the Haunted Mansion because I think that there's possibly something to that. Walt Disney's Haunted Mansion, I believe, was inspired in parts by this movie. Now, of course, this is 1959. The Haunted Mansion debuts at Disneyland in 1969 and Disney World, the Magic Kingdom in the Walt Disney World, in 1971. But there are so many similarities. Instead of a host, we have Vincent Price as our host. Look at the organ plays itself. It's covered in cobwebs. We have a host. He's not a ghost host, but this movie has a host. The hallway, the stretching hallway, the stretching room that has no windows and no doors. Now, if you think I'm reaching, I talked at the beginning of this movie about how those sound effects in the dark were really revolutionary for film going at that time. And that they had possibly launched the idea of sound effects, haunted house record albums. So Disneyland Records releases a haunted house record. The Haunted Mansion doesn't exist yet. But in 1964, 5 years after this movie, they release a movie that is nothing but sound effects. I believe the Imagineers behind the Haunted Mansion were heavily influenced by House on Haunted Hill, and that there are a ton of elements from this movie in that ride. Now, this movie itself is also drawing on funhouse, haunted house conventions. This is bringing the ride to life. And it uses the skeletons and the cobwebs and the severed heads and the jump scares and the things that are coming right for you. It uses all of these classic spook house techniques. But I believe that by putting them in this movie and putting a decent story around it, they sort of renewed all of these elements for a new generation. You can be the judge. I'm just presenting this as a theory. I think there's something to it. Look at the shadow coming around the corner. So this is where we see the turn. Dr. David Trent is playing his own game. Or rather, he's playing a game with Annabelle. Also, the soundtrack has been silent. And at the moment when he walks through the door, the theremin kicks into overdrive, the music kicks into overdrive, and we are about to get one of the biggest bombshells of the movie. As he stares down on what we think is his dead wife, not his dead wife, Frederick's wife, his dead love interest, because that's the revelation, that she's not dead. He says, it's almost over, darling. Every detail is perfect. And I would love to have been in the theater when that happened to see if there was like a gasp or a, like boo. I would love to see how the audience reacted to that. Let's talk about Alan Marshall. He plays Dr. David Trent. He was born in New Sydney, Australia in 1909, and he would go on to become an actor of some renown. Leaving Australia, he began acting on the Broadway stage at the age of 15. Okay, so we have this. We understand the hanging, right? Because she's got this corset on. How did she get from outside the house to back inside the house so quickly? He's discovered for film by Selznick International Studios. He made a handful of movies at MGM. Has an appearance in The Thin Man. He was the lead in the Republic crime film Invisible Enemy in 1938. He appeared with Basil Rathbone and Ida Lupino in 1940's The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes at 20th Century Fox. He then made a handful of films at both RKO and at Columbia. But in 1945, he suffered a nervous breakdown, and he quit acting for more than 5 years. He never quite recovered, both professionally or personally. In an interview with the press in 1958, to promote what was being hailed as a Hollywood comeback, he explained, quote, "I underwent a kind of mental turmoil. There was a long period where I didn't appear to be able to make up my mind. Producers would send me scripts and I'd read them, but I couldn't tell whether or not I would do the picture. Gradually, they stopped sending me scripts." End quote. Even though his stage and film work became more sporadic, and he only has a handful of credits to his name from 1950 onward, you'll find him as a guest star on some of the most popular TV shows of his time, including many of the ones we've already discussed: Wagon Train, General Electric Theater, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, 77 Sunset Strip, M Squad, Bourbon Street Beat, Surfside 6. He also appeared in a 1958 episode of Perry Mason. Now this is interesting and tragic. He died in 1961, that's just a few years after this movie, after suffering a heart attack while performing in the play Sextet opposite Mae West. It was Mae West's play. So he's on stage with Mae West. He has a heart attack. It occurred during the play, but he finished the performance, went back to his hotel room, got in bed, and died at the age of 52. So, another premature death associated with this movie. Again, I'm not suggesting the movie is cursed, but it's just very interesting that there's this dark shadow that does hang over such a fun, silly movie. And that would have been the plan just now as it played out. Nora shoots. And according to the plan, if the bullet had not been a blank, that would be the end. And look at this shot. Look at the cinematography. The blacks are so dark. And the doctor steps out. And now all of this stuff that has been set up before about the acid tank and, you know, the lore of the murders in the house, it all comes full circle. They've planted the seeds for these things. And here they are paying them off at the end of the movie, at the climax of the movie. So the acid bath is open for business. He's dragging Frederick over, and look, cut to black. And it's again the theater of the mind. We start with a black screen and sound effects, and we're ending the movie with a black screen and sound effects. And we, the audience, we know what these two have been up to. We know the plan, but we don't know how it's playing out. So Annabelle's coming down the stairs. I'm just locking into the movie now because we've only got a few minutes left. And it's just masterfully done. And she's revealing her hand. And of course we know Vincent Price is in the room. We know how this is going to end. How do these doors shut automatically? So many doors open and close on their own in this movie. How is this? By the way, I do love the Gothic. So it's Victorian. The inside of this house is very Victorian. You've got gas lamps, which is not something that you would have in a house constructed later. So that implies that this house is older than it actually is. older than we know that it actually is. But these gas lamps imply it's this Victorian thing. It's the ghosts of another time. And so she's walking up to the acid vat. And really, we had our silence. But the organ music is really going overtime here. The cranking up the tension, building this tension. And the skeleton, this is another thing I would love to know how it played. The skeleton rising from the acid, it's widely reported that this is a real skeleton. That the filmmakers could obtain a real skeleton, from a medical facility cheaper than they could actually manufacture a fake one. And I have tried to find evidence to refute that. This shot right here, just in the dark, walking toward the camera. Magnificent. I've tried to refute that this is to find evidence that to the contrary, but apparently it's true. Perhaps you can find evidence to the contrary in your own independent research, but it does seem that the producers of this movie used a real skeleton rather than making one. Which, when we get to the credits at the end of the movie, maybe makes a little bit more sense. I don't know. And, I mean, we know what's going to happen. We're watching it happen. Also, if you are a person who's like, well, this is awfully elaborate. Look at that. Push in. I don't know how, I guess the suggestion was, look at the bubbling of the acid. I guess the suggestion of the hand was enough that there doesn't actually need to be any musculature on the skeleton. But if you're thinking that's, how do they do that? Well, remember, this is the filmmaker that actually used pulleys to fly a skeleton over the audience in the theater. So you commit to the bit, man. You commit to the bit. And here is where it all is revealed. Everything has been revealed as Vincent Price, as Frederick, steps out of the shadows, not too far from the shadows where our good doctor and his betrayer was just a few moments earlier. I like this visual metaphor that Price, Frederick Lauren, is the puppeteer. It's a visual metaphor to represent the machinations of this movie. He has been puppeteering these people. He's been orchestrating this entire event. And he delivers the great line.
Good night, Annabelle. The crime you two planned was indeed perfect. Only the victim is alive and the murderers are not. It's a pity you didn't know when you started your game of murder that I was playing too.
That could be the end of the movie. We do have a few minutes left. The film reportedly earned $2.5 million off of a $200,000 budget, and it was a huge hit for Allied artists. But either unfortunately or perhaps fortunately, the film fell into the public domain when the film's copyright holder failed to renew the copyright, resulting in the widespread duplication and distribution of the movie and making it one of the most seen horror films of all time. Something that I thoroughly believe has helped to grow the film's reputation. This final confession, all is revealed. The gun was loaded with blanks. He's turning himself in, and he will let the courts decide if he's innocent or if he's guilty. He's thought of everything. And then we end again where we began, with Elisha Cook Jr. really taking the lead, scaring us. Now there are 9. There will be more, many more. They're coming for me now, and then they'll come for you. And in true William Castle fashion, he looks right at the camera. He looks directly at us, the audience. So we ended where we started. We ended with people talking to us. This is the shot. Again, the door closes. I think this is the same shot from the beginning of the movie, but reversed. Produced and directed by William Castle? No. The end. Now we have our cast list here. And I do want you to I want you to notice that the skeleton It's played by himself. And I've been played by Heath Holland. It looks like we survived the night, and it's been a most pleasant party. I've enjoyed our time together in the house on Haunted Hill.